Hello, I'm Al Dare with Mickey's Bait and Tackle, and we're here to take you back to last March of 2016 to the Trout Unlimited annual Taiwan On that took place at the Genesee Grand here in Syracuse, New York. What a time that was. We had a lot of fly tyers there, all specializing in their particular genre. And, we have a little history here at Mickey's going back to the 1950s. Mickey actually used to take Gadabout Gaddis fly fishing to the Oswego River for smallmouth bass. He'd be out there with his white fiberglass fly rod throwing bass flies, for the old-time patterns. And we taught fly tying for over 25 years. Most of our instruction now is done online, of course. But I'll tell you, when you really pick up some observation when it comes to tying flies. When an angler first starts fly fishing, it takes usually about 5 years before they get interested in fly tying. We call it the 5-year incubation period. And then they pick up the basic skills, the material handling and all that other stuff. They tie a variety of flies. But after a while, they start to show interest in a particular variety of flies, like whether it be streamers, traditional catskill dries, the modern type comparadun patterns, salmon steelhead flies, saltwater flies, warm water flies. Well, all those flies were represented at this particular event, which you will see. We had some amazing guests. We had Tom Rosenbauer, who has local roots here. He went to Syracuse University. Great conversation with Tom. We had John Shaner, who most of you probably know. He worked in the area. Now he's a representative for a major tackle company. He gets to go all over the world and fish his beautiful traditional soft hackles. We have him tying a soft hackle for us. We have Bob Clauser. Who doesn't have a Clauser minnow in his fly wallet? If you don't, you better get one. And we also have Morgan Lyle, who just wrote a book called Simple Flies. And I guess if you had to sum that book up, it would be less is more. So come on, join us at the annual Taiwan On and see what it's all about. Thanks for being here. I'm Al Dare with Mickey's. So who are we here with today? Looks like Tom Rosenbauer to me.
That's me.
How you doing, bud?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Good to be back in my old stomping grounds.
Yeah, that's for sure. You went to school here.
I went to ESF, 1972 to 76.
So you know a little bit about some of our central New York trout streams.
I do. I miss some of the little limestoners around here. Yeah, I really do.
They're still there, and they still produce fish given the amount of pressure that they receive, especially 9 Mile. It's amazing how resilient.
Yeah, well, 9 Mile always got a lot of pressure, and limestone always got a lot of pressure. But if you go east and west of here, there are some streams that are out kind of in the middle of nowhere that you won't see as much pressure. And I doubt if they're crowded today either.
Yeah, that's for sure.
They weren't then.
You gotta look. Yeah. I can remember hearing stories about you tying flies in the back of Vad's Bait and Tackle.
That's right. Yeah. When I was in college, I worked at Vad's, Vad's Sport Shop on Salina Street, and I would be. 1 minute I would be selling a guy an Orvis bamboo rod, and the next minute I'd be bagging minnows, and then an hour later I'd be down in the basement counting worms into worm containers. So it was a cool place. And I did some fly tying classes there. It's where I met Wayne Waltz and Del Meza there, and I had this. It's so funny. I was a college kid, and all my students were like over 65, and what a riot these guys were. Oh my God, they were so funny. We had a ball.
Those were sort of like the beginning days of the Iroquois chapter of TU.
Yeah. I mean, the Trout Forum had been going for a while. it was like this event, but they called it the Trout Forum, and that was a big deal. I mean, I saw Vince Marinaro there, Charlie Fox, Lee Wolf, Ernie Schwiebert, you know, some of the famous people. So, and I used to, I remember, I didn't have a car. I remember hitchhiking from the campus to the Trout Forum, and then on the way back, I got picked up by a bunch of drunk guys that gave me a joyride down 690 that scared the living daylights out of me. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, the memories are made of, I suppose.
Yeah,
Good and bad.
yeah.
But, so you ever think you might come back and do a little fishing in some of your old waters?
Yeah, I do come back and fish some of my old waters, yeah. My mom still lives in Rochester, so I poke around here a little bit, here and there.
Good. It's
Yeah.
good to know, Tom. Well, hey, thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
Thank
And,
you.
We look forward to your presentation.
I'm hoping to have fun.
Hi, I'm Lisa Green. I work with Casting for Recovery in upstate New York.
So, Lisa, how long has Casting for Recovery actually been in existence?
I'm not sure about from the national level. Do you know?
Oh, at least 20 years, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that too.
Yeah.
The first time I heard of it was at least 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your organization and its relevance to Trout Unlimited today. What are we doing here today? Take your time.
So Casting for Recovery in upstate New York has only been around for about a year. So we did our first program in October of last year. We worked very closely with the national office, who came down and gave us all extensive training. We got a volunteer staff. We have people who are doctors on the staff, who are social workers, and people who are fly fishing instructors like Lindsay and I. And we work closely with local organizations to get donations, to help support the women, and to also provide flies and the people who actually guide on the water for the women.
Yeah, I know some of the girls that have been involved in the past, Vicky being one of them, has done some tremendous work with your organization doing the outreach for women that are recovering. And it seems so rewarding, not just to the women who are actually participating, but to the women who are actually doing the instruction as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it works both ways. It
Right.
really does.
Being a volunteer has been one of the most rewarding things in my life. It's been very powerful, to just stand up in front of that group of women and just to feel their gratitude towards you for volunteering. And then to also see their passion and enthusiasm for learning a new sport and bonding with other people who are also survivors of breast cancer.
Yeah, the natural world is such a healer. No matter what
Absolutely.
your ailment is, if you get out there and you put a fishing rod in your hand, we call it psychiatrist on a stick. No matter what it is that you need to get through in life, the natural world is there to help, and we relate to that big time. Over the years, and we're here to support you ladies, believe it. And I know you got a great crowd today. How's the response been today?
Oh, we've had some great people come by, a lot of people who are interested in volunteering through our organization, a lot of people giving donations. It's just been a great partnership with us and Iroquois Trout Unlimited.
Yeah, I think so. I think it really is a match made in heaven. Now you hope the work continues, which I know it will, and you are going to get all kinds of success down the road. So thanks for being here today, girls.
Yes, thanks a lot. And if somebody's interested in contacting us or volunteering, just look at castingforrecovery.org.
Perfect.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, that's an amazing fly.
Got to reset this, just all the silks.
Hey, I'm here today with John Shaner, and John, Central New York wise, has been synonymous with fly fishing for trout for at least 30, 40 years. He knows the area, he knows a lot of the fly fishermen that come to this area, that have lived in this area. and it's just really nice to be here today. And I know John's a real passionate fly tyer, and lately he's been doing amazing work with your spiders and traditional English soft hackles. And today, John, what do you think? What are we tying today?
Gonna do, I almost think of it as my signature pattern, which is partridge and hare's ear. It's a variation on a partridge in orange. You might see it called some other things in the UK, but it seems to work pretty much everywhere I've used it, and it's really one of my go-to flies. It incorporates all of the basic steps in tying a simple spider, and it's just, again, a very effective, very simple fly. I'm going to use Pure Cell Silk, which is quite traditional for these flies. This is hot orange, color number 19. Now, there's some controversy about whether or not to wax the silk. I do wax my silk when I tie fur-bodied flies, and this is a wax that we call 722. It's 7 parts rosin, 2 parts beeswax, and 2 parts castor oil. And we're only going to wax about 4 or 5 inches of thread, and to do that, I'm just going to draw it through nice and smoothly, not over wax it. And that's all we need. We're just going to make it a little bit tackier and grippy. If there's any extra, we're just going to kind of pull it off. You can actually, if the thread is waxed properly, you can actually hear it squeak when you pull your fingers through it. So I'm going to start about an eye length behind the eye with about 3 or 4 turns. That's it. Now, I'm going to select a brown partridge back feather, and I've already taken these off the skin and sized them, and then I bundle them together, which was quite traditional. And it does save time when you tie. So it's all ready to go, and I've stripped the fluff off, and I'm going to pull the fibers back because I'm going to tie this in by the tip. You see that? You can see I've left the tag on the thread. And I'm simply going to tie that in with about 3 turns. Take my scissors and trim the butt. So at this point, I only have 5 or 6 turns altogether on the hook. Spiders by nature very sparse, and we want to keep the dressing to a minimum. And take a piece of gold wire and butt that in and wind over it in touching turns until I get to just about the point of the hook. I'm going to leave a little bit extra room there. You'll see why in just a second. This is hare's ear fur from the ear of a hare's mask, the actual ear. I'm going to use just a little bit of this. I like to put it in my left hand and just kind of tease out small amounts of it. And that's all I'm going to use. Very, very small amount. I don't need much more than that. I just want to tinge the thread with this. Just add some color and texture to the thread. That's all I'm gonna put on there. Now I've left a little bit of extra room, so I'm gonna wind back several turns until I start to pick up my dubbing, and then wind forward. And if I've done this right, I should end up right there with no extra left. Bring my thread 1 turn in front. I always like to make 1 full turn behind the body. This makes kind of a little tag. And then rib the body with about 5 turns. Back that off and forward, and just 2 turns on the thread in front of the hackle and fatigue the wire, and then I'm going to cut that stem off right there, so I really don't need it. Take my hackle pliers, catch the stem, Now, there's a lot of controversy on how sparse these should be. And what we found is that originally they were more heavily hackled and longer hackled than we consider to be standard today. So my hackle ends up being a little bit longer and a little bit denser. And just about 3 turns, tie it in.
Did you hear someone?
And then
Oh, you might have left. Oh,
just a 2-turn whip finish. Snug everything up. Draw the whip finish tight. And I like to use a razor blade, because it'll give me a nice cut. And then just position the hackle the way we want it. And I'll put a drop of cement. Just kind of hold everything together. Not too much. Tied correctly, there should be a very, very small head. Yep, snuck it quick enough there. And the thread will almost disappear once we varnished it. I've got one kind of little fiber there I don't like the looks of. And the best way to take care of something like that, I've found, is with a good pair of tweezers. Because I can get right in there and I can pop that right off rather than cut it. And there's a partridge in hare's ear. As simple as that.
Boy, less is more, John.
Yeah.
You know?
And when you look at this, you can see it all harmonizes. Just that little bit of dubbing changes the whole aspect of the body and so forth. Very, very traditional styled fly and very, very effective one. So.
Thank you very much. And more people need to be fishing these soft hackles and spiders.
No, actually less should fish them. So I get all the advantage of using them. I don't like to show too many people. It's simple, effective fly.
It is. We're really going back to our roots here.
Yeah.
How old is a fly pattern such as the spider? How far are we going back?
We've got strong written records going back to the mid 18th century. This fly, there's variations of this fly from about that time, and this is well documented by 1817.
Yeah.
So, an angler of 100 or 200 years ago would recognize this fly and know the pattern. And as I say, we've changed, but the trout haven't. And they still respond to the same things that they did 200 years ago.
That's a fact.
Yeah, so.
Thank you, John.
Well, thank you, Al. Yeah, thanks.
When you build one of these wings, you can be, you put about 15 rows in, you got to build them on 100. You spend a lot of time.
Locally, mostly, set up around our Finger Lakes, Ontario, make our way around.
my wife on vacation, and we walked up the stream. I saw a trout or a fish, I'm not sure if it was a trout, but I think it was a trout, rising under the bridge. And I kind of hatched the idea for the painting then. This is John Warakomsky.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, who's down. Hi, I'm Bob Ripley. I'm a wildlife artist, as you can see. Transparent watercolor, it's my medium.
The medium, watercolor, okay.
These are
Very natural.
these are all fish and stories that I've witnessed in my travels, fly fishing and vacationing in different parts of the country. Most of the stuff you see here today is locally caught. I caught all the fish that you see in the paintings. And
That's a landlocked Atlantic.
yeah, I caught that on 7th Lake, and I caught it on a tandem streamer. And I just thought it'd be nice to have the fly with the fish. And that's a single streamer, but not a tandem. I selected that because it just looked better with the fish.
So how long you been doing this?
Well, I worked in advertising as an art director for most of my life, 30-some years, and always had an interest in artwork and painting and watercolors in particular. So when I retired 7 years ago, this is what I started doing. And all the work you see was done, within that time period. I don't just do fish paintings. I do wildlife and landscapes, kind of anything that appeals to me. But more times than not, it's wildlife and trout especially. That's one thing I can draw from without reference. I can draw a trout from memory because I've done so many of them.
It's been said that trout live in beautiful places.
Oh yeah.
Or cliche. And this, you say, is in Vermont, a river that you fished in Vermont.
I didn't fish it, but I would have liked to. I was with my wife on vacation. Fly rods were home, and it was just a very appealing scene. It just kind of harkened back to, it was like a perfect spot.
Well, you can't beat a covered bridge from an artist's perspective, can you? Absolutely. That's beautiful. You really captured the detail.
Well, thanks.
I can see that fly line. It's probably a weight forward 4.
Well, anyway, there wasn't a fisherman in the scene. I added the fish later on. And, a little bit of artistic license.
Why not? Yeah, and it really fits, and it looks beautiful.
Well, thanks.
Absolutely inviting. And I'm looking forward to the nice weather. So, yeah, what else can you tell us about? Are you from Syracuse originally?
No, I'm from Elmira. I went to Syracuse University. That's where I got my degree, and that started my career in advertising. And we've lived in and around the area, usually in the country, ever since. I live closer to Skaneateles now, and in a wild spot. We have turkey and deer, and just saw 6 wood ducks on our pond yesterday. So there's reference material all the time. I don't have to travel far to find it.
Central New York, we've got 3 or 4 beautiful trout streams.
Oh yeah.
We're so fortunate in that regard, and it's our Trout Unlimited people that keep an eye on those waters and make sure that they're working perfectly, which I'm proud to say.
Yeah.
And it's nice having you here today.
Well, thanks. Thanks.
It's such a weird history of him. It seems like every year I got somebody else.
I'm afraid I'm going to break the damn thing. No way, dude. Lauren hates power.
Listen, they're tools.
Yeah.
The worst part was it was all back. Half of it was back orders. It was like all of a sudden, like boom, a whole bunch of things came in I wasn't expecting. 946 years.
God, if I had to put $1.
Hi, I'm Morgan Lyle. I'm the author of Simple Flies, and I'm very happy to be here at Taiwan On in Syracuse.
Great having you here, Morgan. I know you have a reputation for doing simple flies. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can, and I wanted to show you one. And this little guy here, it's called the killer bug. It was invented by a pretty famous fly tyer named Frank Sawyer in England in the mid 1900s. And it's nothing more than some yarn wrapped on a hook and held in place with some copper wire. And it was a few years back when I began experimenting with this fly and doing so well with it and catching so many trout with it that I began to become fascinated with the idea of really simple flies and why they work and why people who were very accomplished fly tyers and who could tie their flies as complex and detailed as they wanted to would sometimes choose instead to tie them as basic as this. They must have had a reason for doing that. And as I began to look into it, it's a really interesting subject.
Boy, it just amazes me all the years I've been fly fishing and how less is more becomes more of a lesson. And it's just incredible. It's just incredible. We still love tying the classic wet flies.
Sure.
With all the fancy materials.
Yep.
But when it comes to fishing flies, I mean, what can you say? Less is more.
Less is more. I think the idea is that this suggests the kinds of food that, in this case, that trout eat well enough that they sort of fill in the blanks themselves, you know? Or as one author I quote in the book said, they connect the dots themselves. So I sometimes wonder if you put too much stuff on a fly, you don't start to make it look like an inanimate object instead of a living thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, some of my most productive trout flies are the simplest, and I think you're right. I think at times the trout fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I think so. And of course, and you're right, it's fun we enjoy tying flies, so the more fly there is to tie, the more fun you have, theoretically. At the same time, you know, not everybody has a lot of time, not everybody has a lot of space, and it's nice to be able to make good fishing flies at work that take 2 or 3 minutes to tie.
Yeah, and a lot of the satisfaction in fly tying is for our own selves. As fly tyers, we gain so much from our own creations and the creations of the masters that have come down over the years. Hey, let's talk about this book you just came out with called Simple Flies.
Sure.
That's a rather new entry into the marketplace.
Yeah, I'm proud of it. It's published by Stackpole Books, and it's the same idea. And it's both the publisher and I kind of agreed that it's a subject that hadn't really been talked about very much in a long form kind of way. The idea that people who are very accomplished, expert fly fishers and fly tyers, and who can make a fly just as fancy as they wanted to, still sometimes chose to make them very, very simple. Just a couple of materials and a couple of steps to tie them, and why that might be. So I did some research on fly designers from past years and interviewed some current modern day tyers, and it's turned out to be a very interesting subject.
Well, you've really made a contribution in that regard, because everybody's going crazy to figure out how to make flies that are so complicated these days. And it's nice to see a realistic pattern, and it's nice to see a traditional classic Atlantic salmon fly. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's also refreshing to know that how effective these simple flies can really be.
Yeah.
So, thanks a lot for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's great to be here.
Hey, today we are really lucky to be here at the Iroquois Taiwan On, but even more fortunate that we happen to be here with what I consider the pillars of the fly tying community, and that would be Bob Klauser. Bob,
thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, this is a wonderful place, and there's a lot of people enjoying themselves.
Seems that way.
You bet.
Maybe a little too much.
That all depends on who's getting too much.
I mean, come on, if fly fishing is the most fun you can have standing up, then I assume that fly tying is the most fun you can have sitting down.
Well, that's true.
In fact,
that's a good way to put that.
Your fly, the Klauser minnow, there isn't a fly box within a 3,000-mile radius that probably doesn't have one of them things in it, I assume.
When I get a chance to go fishing, the guys are looking for my tackle box. Bob, where's your flies? And I'm going, in my pocket in a Ziploc bag. I only need a couple.
Yeah, That's what Lee Wolf used to do. He carried Secret's box back in the day. And he invented the fly vest.
Yeah, I know. That's incredible. So
tell us a little bit about how you came about the Clouser minnow, please.
Well, if I showed you what the original looked like, nobody would ever bought it. I knew that weight in a fly was really important, because what it creates a fly that never stops moving. Even during the retrieve, the weight will cause the fly to rock, fall, drop, rise on the strip. So weight's important. So my first attempt at getting weight and a streamer fly mixed together so I could fish something that looks like an escaping bait fish, I would take and squeeze a piece of water gremlin split shot on the hook, and it had ears on, and I would first tie a piece of white bucktail on the bottom, pinch the shot over, and where the groove of the ears were, I would lay in some Christmas tree tinsel and some darker colored hair, so I'd have a white belly, a black top, and some flash in the fly. But it looked like the dickens.
Okay.
It caught fish.
Oh yeah.
But I couldn't. Nobody was going to buy that thing.
Sure.
So, lo and behold, back in the early '80s, Tom Schmucker from Wapsie Fly Company sent Lefty and I poured lead eyes that were made from the bead chain molds. Out of different sizes of bead chains, they made different sizes of lead eyes. And when I got them in the mail, I looked at them and went, "This is the ticket to the fly." Now it's going to look like it has eyes, and I can sell it then.
It's appealing to the angler, which is important. But not only that, it's the function too. It's
the deal with this fly, and even a fly this size with the eyes on. This is actually a half and half, and that half and half come from, of course, I had to have the fly with part of Lefty's fly. Him and I are good fishing friends. The rear half of this fly is a Lefty's Deceiver, and the front half is a Clouser minnow.
Yes.
So it's called a half and half.
Okay.
And this will represent the bigger bait fish, and this represents the thinner bait fish. So we have two flies that'll now do the same thing, and all they do is when you retrieve it and stop your retrieve, these things never stop moving because of the weight. So it doesn't just look like a bait fish, it represents the escaping ability that a bait fish has. And a predator fish, all his life he has to catch something to eat it. And if your fly isn't moving all the time and it stops dead,
right,
and then you'll see a big swirl in back of the fly.
Gotcha.
And Lefty says you can't fry swirls.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I don't know any recipes either.
So what happens when the fly stops, it scares the fish. You see the swirl where he refuses it and goes away.
Okay, and that's what makes this better than a jig.
Yes.
Because a jig is stationary.
Stationary,
this
or
is
you
on
work
the move, and it's swimming.
This
like
is coming and stops and drops. Does that.
Perfect.
And
boy, I'll tell you.
And can be cast on a fly rod.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
But I'm happy with it because it catches fish.
And it does. And if I had $1 for every time I've seen my buddies pull one of these things out of their fly box and tie one on, and boom, you know.
They get something on
it's
it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. But boy, we're glad you're here.
Well, you know,
to show us and talk to us about the history of this pattern.
Yeah,
and,
it's great.
Boy, what can I say? You know, I'm awestruck, man.
Thank you. Good. That's good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.